Welcome, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And so we are, as you know, working on Torah T'mimah on Parshat Lech Lecha, and this last chapter in Lech Lecha, which discusses the Brit Milah. And I thought the session we had yesterday, if there are people, if you're watching this and you didn't see yesterday's session, I would love to recommend that you take a look at it. I thought he had some really very insightful things to say about El Shaddai. At any rate, God goes on to say to Abraham, so he says, Ani El Shaddai, hithalech lefanai, walk yourself before me, v'heyeh tamim, and be perfect. So, well, what are we talking about? Hithalech, etc. Darash Rabbi Simlai interpreted, my dichtiv, what is meant by the verse in Psalms, Tehillim, Tedvav, Psalm 15, Adonai mi yagur b'holecha, Lord, who shall dwell in your tent? Holech tamim, the one who goes in an upright way. So there's that word, heye tamim, right? Perfect, acts perfectly. But obviously none of us is perfect, but at least here Jastrow translates that word as in an upright way in this particular context. Holech tamim ze Avraham. If we want to have an example of such a person, that would be Abraham. Dichtiv, because it says, Hithelech lefanai v'heyeh tamim, right? So, walk before me. So I'm not sure what I meant here. I must have put in a, let's see here. Don't actually know what I must have written here, and I don't know. In Jastrow, it looks like. Hayeh Tamid, right? So it says the same words, and be upright, perfect. And it's in Tractate Makot, page 24a. So let's see what we have here in terms of a Torah T'mimah. There should be something there. And I assume it's a bet. Let's take a look. Oh, all right. Let's see if there's anything there. Maybe there's not. I'm looking to see. Oh, yeah, there it is. The bet's sort of hiding right in there. Let's take a look. And we are here. Mefaresh inyan hatmimut, right? He can explain this issue of tmimut, of perfection. Shahaya, so this is what he means. Shahaya mevatel da'ato v'chachmato, that he would negate his own knowledge and his wisdom, ligabe tzivyo, in the face of his commands, Shalakadosh Baruch Hu, of the Holy One, blessed be He. In other words, what this is saying, to try and, if I can put it in plain English, is that we all sort of come with a sense of our own knowledge and wisdom, and then we read things that that make us question those particular things. And the point about Abraham was that he didn't question God's wisdom and God's knowledge. He questioned his own wisdom and knowledge before God. Shelo sha'alahu, that is, Abraham did not question God, tam vehechreach, a reason and the necessity al mitzvot milah. He didn't question God as to why he should be doing it and how wise it was. Abraham did not take his own personal medical knowledge and say to God, question God as to why to do that. So tamim, in this sense, is being willing to accept upon yourself the divine commandment and not question it. And we can understand, right, a commandment such as circumcision, and certainly circumcision when Abraham was 99 years old, might well be questioned. So that's the idea. Right. Let's go on. V'heye tamim, and be tamim, be perfect or upright. Amar Rabbi, said Rabbi, and when we see Rabbi without any a name attached to it, it's referring to Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who was head of the community around the 2nd century and is the editor, the author of the Mishnah as we currently have it. So that was an amazing act on the part of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, and to make sure that something that was originally just in oral, it was just only oral, and he committed it to writing so that it wouldn't be forgotten. So because it had to be studied all the time in order to memorize it, and the Romans had forbidden the Jews at pain of death to study it. So Rabbi said, Gdola milah, the act of circumcision is great, shekol hamitzvot she'asa Avraham Avinu, because all the commandments which Abraham, our forefather, performed, lo nikra shalem ad shemal. He was, in other words, despite the fact that Abraham performed all these commandments, he was never called shalem, whole, ad shemal, until he circumcised himself. Shneimar, as it says in this, regarding this particular commandment, hithalech lefanai v'heye tamim, walk before me and be perfect. Samach apasuk hasheni. So this particular comment is relying on the next particular verse, right? Ve'etna briti beini uveincha. I am going to put my covenant, establish my covenant between myself and you. V'chein mefurash bidrasha haba'ah, as will be further explained in the next interpretation. So let's take a look quickly if you want to see that next verse. It's right here. Here we go. Ve'etna briti beini uveinecha, and I will place my covenant between you and your offspring. Between myself and you. Forgive me. Between me and between you. V'arbe odcha meba'od ba'od, and I will multiply you greatly, exceedingly. So back to here. So you will see what the question is. So here we go. Uva Midrash Rabbah come, and in the Midrash Rabbah on Bereshit, in this particular, where it's commenting on this particular passage, Reish Perek Mem Vav, it's at the very beginning of chapter 46. Ita, it states, She'amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the Holy One, blessed be He, said to him, Yeh Shalem, be complete, be whole. V'tzarich biur, and this requires some explanation. Deha ora, because it would seem on the surface, ta'ar bal mum yunach al chesron, that the description of bal mum, in other words, sometimes when we talk about an animal that's perfect, means it doesn't have a blemish. So here it means, you should be unblemished. That would be a way to understand it. So that the term bal mum, something that has an imperfection, yunach al chesron, we'd apply that to something that was missing a part, velo al yoteret, and not on something that had an additional part. V'yitachen lomar, and so we need to say, so that's on the surface, but we need to be able to say, to hava amina, that we might have said, okay, mishum kol yeter kanitul dami, that there's a principle that if an animal or a person has an additional limb, it's as if it is removed. In other words, because generally speaking, we look at something blemished as having something missing, right? We have on principle this halacha that if something has an additional thing, we look on it as if it is removed. Now Torah Temimah is going to go into this a little deeper to understand this. So dami means it looks like it. It resembles. Ukedat haposkim, and this follows the opinion of the hallachic arbiters, bepirush kol yeter kenitul, right? That when they explain this idea of something that is additional, as if it's really removed, right? Teheve kenitul od oto ever. Okay, so it sees as if that particular limb has been removed. In other words, he's going to give an example. The mashal, for example, behema sheyesh la chamesh raglayim. If an animal has 5 legs, it's born with 5 legs. Heve kenitul achat tiv'i. It's as if one regular limb has been removed. Veheve kamo shenishar la rak shalosh raglayim. And so this is interesting that it actually, that a normal animal now, as a normal animal, since a normal animal has 4 legs, and this additional leg we look at as if its fourth leg has been removed. In other words, it has 5 legs, and so it's as if one of those 4 legs is not really appropriate. In other words, that's why it has that fifth leg. And so as if it only now has 3 legs. V'chein beyoteret dildul davuk be'ezed aver. And likewise, if there is some kind of sinew or thread that is hanging with some certain limb, heve kinitul kol oto aver. We look as if that particular limb, because it has these additional pieces, as if there's something wrong with it, and if it didn't, and as if it doesn't exist there really at all. It's not really functioning at all. Ian Abi Betaz, this is one of the commentators on the Shulchan Aruch. So he says, look at the Taz, Turei Zahav, Pri Chadash. He's another major commentator on the Shulchan Aruch. The Yorei Deya, that's the part of the Shulchan Aruch, one of the 4 parts of the Shulchan Aruch, Yorei Deya, Siman Nun Hey, under the paragraph 55. Ulefize necha, and for this reason we can understand. It makes sense. The im haorla nechshav keva'al mum, that if, oh sorry, that with a foreskin. In other words, if we look at the foreskin as an additional limb, so to speak, attached, kenichshav kevalmum. Consequently, this person would be considered a person who has a foreskin, because it should normally, at least we're saying, that to be perfect, it should not be there. This person is seen as imperfect, as having a blemish. Dekevan dehaorla hu yeter, because since the foreskin is additional, right? It's an excess, v'chol yeter kenitul dami, and we have this principle that anything that is an excess is considered as if it is removed. Heve kenitul kol ha'ever, we see that whole limb as having been removed, mimkomo, from its place. V'shapir heve balmum, and that's why it makes total sense that this person is now seen as blemished, mishum chesron aver, on account of missing a limb. Vehine, and behold, and indeed, af ki ein lahavi ra'aya muchletet midrash v'agada, even though you cannot bring a compelling argument, a compelling proof from midrash or legend, the davar halacha, to a law. We can't use these kinds of midrashim to support and to allow us to have a compelling resolution to a particular item of law, right? B'chol zeh, nevertheless, kismach ra'aya, right? There's at least some support of a proof, midrash there, from this particular midrash. Lahapirush kol yeter kenatul, to an explanation that everything that is excessive is as if it's removed, kenitul echad tiv'i, as if one of the normal limbs is removed. It's as if it's gone. V'chein b'yoteret didul. And likewise, if we're talking about something that's hanging, or again, like a sinew or something like that, that it's hanging. Kenatul kol oto ever. We look as if that entire limb has been removed. Kefima shikatavnu, following what we just wrote. So the difference is the deal dual issue is if it's not an entire limb, not an entire limb itself. Nevertheless, if there's something hanging or an excess on a particular limb, it's as if the limb isn't there at all. De lefize, because according to this, it paresh hamidrash Rabbah, we can now understand the midrash Rabbah, the tuftam, well. We have a good explanation of what's going on in the midrash Rabbah. Masha enochein, which would not be the case, laha pirush kol yeta kenito, which would not it wouldn't apply if we understood everything that's an additional as if it's removed. That is to say that if we understood that what was removed, kenitul rak oto hayoteret, as if that particular addition was not really there, it was taken away. Kashema'od, we would not understand it, or it would be difficult, very difficult to understand ma shehe'arnu, my shay, okay, that which we clarified, my shayach al hayoteret balmum. How does that really, why would that particular principle apply to someone who is now considered an imperfect, a blemished thing? In other words, if it was only the addition that was understood as being removed, the person wouldn't be blemished at all. But if you understand that when you have that particular item that's appended to a limb or something like that, that the entire limb is now gone, all right, then we understand that because now it's missing the limb, it's certainly a balmum, it's certainly blemished. Acharei, achar netilat ha'olah, because after we remove the foreskin, he would be shalem. In other words, if we saw the foreskin and understood that which is an addition is considered as if it's removed, then in fact the person should be shalem. We should consider them to be perfect and not blemished. V'imkein lo shayach bazeh lomar, and if that's the case, if we understand the principle of something that's additional is removed only as the thing itself being removed, right? It wouldn't make sense. Lomar kenitul ligriuta. We couldn't say that if it's removed, it's worse, that the thing is worse off. After all, we'd be saying if the thing itself is what's seen as removed and nothing more, then actually it's a benefit because what was an additional thing has now been removed. So, Bedok and this QED, that's what makes sense. So I know this was a little bit involved. Is there anything you need me to explain further, or can we continue? So I don't see any raised hands, so I'm going to assume we can keep going. All right, so let's go on. Let's see where we actually catch this. Right. So we had this here, and now we're on to this one here. V'heyei tamim, right, and be perfect. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, said Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav. B'sha'ah she'amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Avraham Avinu, at the moment when the Holy One, blessed be He, said to Abraham, our patriarch, Hitalech lefanai v'hayei tamin, okay, walk before me and be perfect. Achazto ra'ada, terror, shaking, trembling seized him. Amar, he thought to himself, Shema yesh bi davar meguneh. Maybe I have something in myself that is reprehensible, that's disgusting. Kevan she'amar lo etna briti beini uveinecha, but when he said, you go before me and be perfect, and then he added and say, and I shall place my covenant between myself and you, nitkarera da'ato, he calmed down. So this is our understanding. That's why when we said before in our previous comment that that we need to look at this with this verse as well, we need to look at that other verse with this verse as well. That's why we understand. Because when it says, be perfect, it means you need to be perfect and not that you actually will be perfect, right? We could understand it in both those senses so that we can understand now that we have this comment here, we could think, we can understand that what God was saying to Abraham was, if you in fact perform this commandment, you will be perfect, and I will be able to give you the covenant between myself and you, and not saying you need to try to be perfect. Let's take a look here quickly. Let's see, I think we have a hey. Yes. Okay. Okay. I guess it's a Dalet. Dalet. Make sure I do have the place. Yeah, right there. Dalet. Hainuhach. Okay, Didasha Hakodemet. This is the whole point of the previous comment. Uvishinui lashon ktsat. But it's with a little bit of different language. It's just being saying it in a different way. Uvecholze, and nevertheless, lo nimnanu lahatika, right? Because even though it's saying pretty much the same idea as the previous comment, we still did not want to remove it. We still wanted to make sure that we copied it as well. Acharei, because ki va'a b'gemara, because belashon baraita, because in the Talmud, this particular passage here comes as a baraita, meaning and it's a source outside the Mishnah. But certainly baraitas have authority to them. For ulai Tana Rabbi Shtehen. And even though the previous one is said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, it's possible that he actually taught both of them. So let's take a look at this. Okay, right. How this one is stated. Yeah, so it's okay. There it is. Tanya Rabbi Omer. Okay. Let me make sure I have the right place. Yeah, they're both said in the name of Rabbi. So that certainly would make sense as to why Torah T'mimah would say that he said, okay, so it says, Rabbi Shtehen ke'achad b'pam acheret. So he said it a different, he said it, the two of them, another time is what it seems to be saying. Yeah, kol echad, each one, kol echad b'pam acher. Bifnei atzmo. Forgive me. I have to figure out the abbreviations, right? And it's possible that because they're both stated by Rebbe, right, that he actually taught both of these comments separately, right, in its own right. V'gam yesh ledayek tzat chidush. And we also, if we look carefully, we'll be able to see a little bit of a chidush, a new idea, b'shinui halashon, in the fact that it's stated differently. Kafi sheyitpa'er lahama'ayin. He's saying, as will become clear to one who looks at this carefully. So let's take a quick look at this, right? So there's a sort of, I would say, at least as I understand it now, that the second one makes it very clear the point that I started to make after you read the second one, that God was reassuring Abraham that by circumcising himself, by performing the mitzvah of circumcision, he would be, in fact, perfect. The first one, that first drush that we had, see if I can find it here, right, is simply saying, it's not saying it quite the same way. It's simply saying that it's not giving that meaning quite as clearly, because the point there seems to be just how great Milah is, which is what he says. So there is a little bit of an idea that a clarification, you might say, and that the point of the first one is just to say that of all the mitzvot up to that point that Abraham had performed, this was the greatest one, right? With the implication of the second one. But the second one really, in some ways, clarifies what God meant when he told Abraham to get circumcised, and that what he was saying to Abraham is that in circumcision itself, you will have perfected yourself. And that's all I'm going to say about that one. So I'm going to stop the share and allow you to comment or question. Mead, was that too involved and confusing, or?
It's fairly involved and confusing. I would have to say yes, but he has to have an answer. So that's how he got there. That's all.
And when you say who, you're talking about Torah T'mimah?
Well, yes, and that's actually true through the whole Mishnah and Gemara. You need answers to these
Well,
questions.
but when you say you need answers, you can understand that in two ways. You can say you need answers so you come up with something, or you can say you need answers so you have to look carefully and see what the answer might be.
And the answer is both. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear you. I actually think that when he reads this, if I'm understanding this correctly,
Yep.
I think what happens is he sees what when you read this stuff a lot, you see problems that you never see when you read it just superficially.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And at
So
the same time, what happens is that something happens in your mind where you realize something, where he for sure can dip into this vast store of knowledge that he has from the tradition and try to explain them in terms of what he himself knows. So it's not like saying, well, here's an answer and take it or leave it kind of
right,
thing.
right, right.
He definitely wants to feel that what he's saying makes sense and that there's some level of compulsion to it, you might say, at least some level of it making sense.
Yeah. No, he has to in his own mind. He has to reconcile. Okay, this
Mm.
is what it
Mm.
means, and this is how we
Mm.
got there.
So
I'm,
then,
I'm
yeah. Oh,
it's just the basic process of the analysis.
right. But there's no doubt that you can understand that command that God gave Abraham in more
Yes,
than one way. And he is not, Torah T'mimah is not the one who's coming up with that. That is something he's found in the Talmud
sure.
or the
No, this
Midrash
this
Rabbah or something like that.
antedates,
Yes, yes,
the uh, the current commentary by many centuries. Yes, layers
mhm,
and layers.
right.
Okay, no, it's fine.
I can't figure out why God. Abraham was 75 years old when he noticed God. Why didn't he say to his family, let's all worship God? He should have told his father that there is a God and stop worshiping idols. He should have done that, but he didn't do that.
Well, Harlan, you have to sort of ask yourself, just telling someone to do something, will they automatically do it? And
Mm.
certainly when a child is saying to his parent, this is what you got to do, maybe in modernity we do, do whatever our children tell us to do. But I think that the reason why Abraham was 75, and again, you know how I always try to look through this material in terms of a literary lens, is that in some ways it's saying that it was a process of experience and intelligence that took 75 years for Abraham to be able to really realize this. That it isn't a light switch, that in fact, discovering God is a process. And it's a process that can take years to be convinced that there is, in fact, a divine creator to everything.
Today, how about today? Does people still remember or pray God? Do they understand
Well,
God?
there are many who do. I think there's a vast number of people who do. There are also a vast number of people, especially in Western society, that question it. that find other criteria for the truth as they understand it.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's there always was too, Harlan. It's not something that's necessarily only true today. And I think there may well have been, times when people were less responsive to an idea of a divine creator. There's a natural reason for people not to want a divine creator because it means they're free to do whatever they like. They can be their own arbiters of what's right and wrong. But when you believe in a divine creator, you no longer can say that. At least if you believe that human beings have a relationship with their creator.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are people throughout history that are famous, agnostics or atheists, etc., etc. So,
I can't understand why people, the Christians, have the Ten Commandments. The Arabs have the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments were with the Jewish God, and yet they worship other gods. I don't get it.
well, Harlan, I don't think we can, I'm not even sure how to understand the term Jewish God, because from my perspective, God is above all of these things. And when we say Jewish, and possibly you mean this as well, we're talking about the way in which our tradition understands the divine. But I don't know that it necessarily means that all other understandings are wrong. Okay, I mean, I like the idea of different strokes for different folks, and I've felt for a long, long time now that the fact that there's more than one religion, but that all points to different ways of approaching a divine, ultimate divine creator, is actually something that, from my perspective, is a glorification of God. That God can't be limited in some way. And while I see my own beliefs and my own attempts to understand Judaism as an invitation.
Yeah, well, we got the covenant. Why don't all the other people get the covenant?
Well, my sense is that they do. That God, I don't know that it says you're the only one I'll have a covenant with. So my
Oh,
sense is that it's quite possible that God has covenants with other people as well. I mean, that's
hmm.
part of what's amazing about God, is that God is able to create people who can look at things in such different kinds of ways. And rather than being competitive, I think we can learn. I can tell you that in my own life, I've learned some, what I feel are very great lessons from other religions. And it doesn't mean I've given up my Judaism in any way. In fact, I'd like to think that as I've gotten older and perhaps learned a little bit more, that I have a better understanding of these things and maybe even can articulate some of these ideas. David.
Yeah, kind of building on that, I guess the way that I view that also is that religion is kind of a window into God. So if you think about it that way, a house has multiple windows, they look different, everybody has their own window,
Right.
right? Saying
Yes.
that my window is better than your window is not it's not something you can really do, right? So maybe we have a better window, but everybody else can have a window too. So anyway,
And
that's
maybe our window works for us,
yeah.
right? It has to do with the way in which we tend to view things, and other people have different ways of viewing things. It's also the trouble is this competitive thing has led to people being tortured and killed. It's not a good way. It's hard for me to sort of really justify that kind of stuff. And I know there's stuff in the Bible that one might pull out and say, well, look at this going on here. And I would have to say that in general, uh, the issue there had more to do with the crass immorality in which people were treating one another, and not so much about the fact that their understanding of God was different from ours.
That's what happened when God destroyed the world by water because the Jews were against each other. They were doing wrong things.
So when you say destroy the world by water, are you talking about Noah?
Yeah, about
So
Noah.
there were
Yeah.
no Jews at that time, Harlan.
Oh, they were Hebrews. They weren't
No, there
Hebrews.
were no Hebrews. Hebrews are
Oh,
descendant of Abraham, who happened 10 generations later.
oh, okay.
So I think that, but it's also, I mean, even though you may have been mistaken about that, nevertheless, you're still drawing out an idea that that there was a notion of God's presence amongst humanity at that particular time.
Yeah.
So anyway, with that, I am going to conclude our recording.